For more on this open letter to the Fed, we bring in one of the people who signed it. Bill Kristol, editor of the Weekly Standard. You may know him as the former chief of staff to Vice President Dan Quayle. Bill, glad you could join us. Here's a question for you. I'm looking at some of the names on this list, and the presence of you, for example, and some others might lead people to believe that it is a highly politicized letter, a conservative or Republican letter. Is that true? And if not, is there a danger that it will be interpreted as such?
No, last I looked, this is a democracy, and people are allowed to write letters to the Fed chairman and suggest he change a foolish policy. And if the Fed defenders are going to retreat to the position that anything the Fed does, even if it's utterly unprecedented, even if there's no crisis, even if lots of economists think it's foolish, that no one's allowed to criticize it, is that really the position that the Fed defenders now want to take? They've had such a wonderful record over the last few years that the rest of us poor souls who don't have Nobel Prizes can't write Ben Bernanke a letter?
No, absolutely not. Bill, the letter says, in this case, we think improvements in tax spending and regulatory policies must take precedence in the national growth program. This is instead of further monetary stimulus. Lots of people would agree with you, but those developments just haven't been forthcoming. So what choice is the Fed left with if people who are elected to serve Americans aren't doing their jobs?
They're about to extend current tax rates, which will be a pro-growth measure. There's a new Republican House coming in that's going to look to relieve regulatory burdens. I think they're going to begin to reduce the terrible spending that's created all this debt that's burdening markets. The Fed, it's not. So I don't think the Fed's job is not to second-guess politicians and to allegedly do something that politicians can't do. If there were a crisis, if this were late 2008, and the Fed said we've got to do this to stop the banking system from going over the cliff, we've got to stop this to stop the Great Depression, I would say, okay, you know what, I'll defer to their judgment. The banking system's not going over the cliff. We're growing at 2% annually. This is just the Fed deciding arbitrarily and with much discretion that this is, Ben Bernanke happens to think that maybe this is a good policy and he's just going to execute it. And I don't think that's appropriate, really, in a democracy.
Bill, in addition to you, a number of very notable academics, investors, analysts, and commentators signing this letter. Who didn't sign? Who did you guys try to sign up to this E21 effort who didn't want to participate?
You know, what was amazing was how many people did sign, and a few economists just don't sign letters like this in principle. But I would say, honestly, these are mostly conservatives, and someone like me has served in Republican administrations. But honestly, what's amazing to me is how little support there is for this Fed action among economists of all stripes. And I think, frankly, it's a signal of desperation by the Fed, and I don't think it's helping the U.S. dollar. I don't think it's helping confidence in the markets. I honestly think if Ben Bernanke announced that they were unwinding this early, that they had taken a fresh look and decided this wasn't necessary, it would help markets and help investor and consumer confidence.
Bill, instead of QE2, what should the Fed be doing right now?
The Fed should be keeping monetary policy stable, in my humble opinion, but I am not a Nobel Prize-winning economist or even an economist. They might look at beginning to raise interest rates because, you know what, Alan Greenspan kept interest rates low for a couple of years, much longer than seemed necessary by the objective numbers, and we ended up with a horrible bubble. And I'm awfully worried that the Fed is doing this now. But I'll let other people debate interest rates. But with 0% interest rates, we're also having QE2. I just think it looks like desperation, and it's unnerving markets.
Bill, we thank you for joining us. Bill Kristol, editor of the Weekly Standard.